Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube! My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're bringing you a first look at Tier 9 Italian cruiser Brindisi. Now, Brindisi has been given to us to look at on the public test server here for 8.7, but we are not allowed to play this ship just yet. So let's take a tour, and I'll show you what we can. We'll just kind of talk through things here. If you go into this ship thinking that this is Amalfi, the Tier 8 cruiser, with an extra turret, you really wouldn't be far off from reality. Unlike Amalfi, Brindisi's 44.5, almost 45,000 hit points are decidedly average. Tier 9 German cruiser Roon still tops the heavy cruisers of the tier at just over 49,000 hit points. And Brindisi's HP pool is behind that of even USS Buffalo over in the American heavy cruiser line. She is ahead of St. Louis, though. She's ahead of Saint Louis. So, yes, they beat the French out in something. So, there you go. Continuing with that theme, her torpedo protection is the best among heavy cruisers for the tier. Only Tier 9 supercruisers Alaska and Kronshtadt are ahead of her in this particular department. Now, if you've watched the Amalfi video, her armor scheme is going to seem very, very familiar. 150mm belt amidships, topped by a 30mm upper belt, 25mm extremities and deck plating, and this 50mm strake that goes all the way to the bow. She does have a little extra deck armor just aft of the funnels. Well, actually, the deck armor is underneath the superstructure completely. So she has this 30mm deck armor throughout. But there aren't really any significant changes or improvements beyond this. One thing to watch for, and I haven't really pointed this out until now. Let me kind of zoom in here so it becomes very obvious. The armor on the Italian 203mm turrets is not the greatest. Only 150mm here on the glacis plate, and 120mm is the max here on the back. Everywhere else is like 100 or 75. Like, there's just not a lot of armor on this turret facing. So in combat, especially against higher caliber guns, these things will probably get knocked out pretty routinely. Keep that in mind, and make sure that you're taking preventive maintenance on your captain, or possibly in conjunction with Main Armaments Modification 1 in your upgrades. As noted earlier, Brindisi mounts an extra turret over Amalfi, clocking in with 4 of these triple barrel installations. The reload time now stretches to a whopping 20 seconds, though being Tier 9, she can equip Main Battery Modification 3 and drop that down to about 17.5 seconds. On paper, the 20-second reload gives her a competitive DPM, but some of that's going to depend on how well the SAP performs in reality versus how well it looks like it might perform on paper. These are the same 55 caliber barrels as Amalfi, so she still has those awesome shell velocities, and her range now goes out to 16.7. This is not worst in tier, but it still feels pretty low. She's also at a tier where if you wanted, you could install Fire Control System Modification 2, and that does push her main battery range out to 19 and change, about 19.5 kilometers. Dimitri Donkoy's existence saves Brindisi from having worst in-tier detection values, but it is a narrow miss. 15.5 kilometers you see there versus Donskoy's 16 kilometers. I simply don't understand why these high-tier ships have ranges this low, main battery ranges this low, with detection values this high. Even Donskoy has nearly 2 kilometers more range than her detection radius. Brindisi has like 1.2 kilometers. Maybe they're trying to force players into taking the spotting aircraft instead of the catapult fighter or something. I don't know. A full stealth build does get Brindisi down to 12.2 kilometers surface detection, but she's still going to be outspotted by basically every other cruiser at Tier 9. One nice thing, she is easily the fastest Tier 9 cruiser, topping out well over 36.5 knots. This is going to give her a measure of control over certain engagements, especially when you combine that with the ability of the full throttle smoke to turn around and maybe move from a pushing position to a kiting position, depending on how a game is playing out. Brindisi does see a bit of an uptick in her torpedo firepower. She retains the quadruple launcher per side configuration that Amalfi has, one tier down, but her torpedoes pick up a little extra alpha damage and a little extra speed. They now move 56 knots, and you see there the alpha damage moves up from about, it was about 12,500 up to just shy of 14,000. Still working at a decently long range here. We've gone from 12 kilometers out to 13.5, which is a little memey, actually, when you think about it for a cruiser. AA-wise, things on paper here look much, much better than Amalfi, right? Like, her long-range aura is pretty average, I'd say, for the tier, but this mid-range aura is really, really solid. She does not have a short-range aura. You can see that she's just missing that stat entirely, which probably explains why the mid-range one feels so good. In terms of, like, overall AA power, she's a little ahead of Ibuki, which is good, but still well behind everybody else in the tier. Whether that really impacts things remains to be seen, right? With all the AA mechanics changes going in, they're changing how manual fire works, they're changing the priority sector system, they're changing how some of the captain skills work. Like, it's just, we don't really know where this is going to land. So I would not put a tremendous amount of time in noodling out the AA on these ships just yet until some of the AA changes start to settle out. The tail with consumables should be pretty familiar by now. Of course, damage control party, full throttle smoke, a choice between catapult fighter and spotting aircraft. And of course, now because we're a tier 9 cruiser, she does get the the repair party here. This is a standard repair party, nothing fancy. You've seen this before. It's the same repair party you'd find on Roon or something. If you want to learn more about the full throttle smoke, if you have not watched some of the previous videos, go check out my video on tier 5 Montecuccoli, and that will explain how this full throttle smoke works. So there you go, guys. Quick overview of Tier 9 Brindisi. I really like this, the look of this ship. This to me is a strong contender for one of the better Tier 9 cruisers, especially once we get the SAP we kind of wrap our brains around how that all works and get the reloads of these things balanced correctly. All right, guys, appreciate your time. Take care. Be safe out there. See you around the channel. Catch you next time.